In the mid-1960s, an engineer named Raymond Radus built a pair of boots that shouldn't have existed. They allowed an astronaut to walk upside down, indefinitely, without a power source. They defied the standard laws of magnetism. And then, they vanished from the record. Today, we are opening the X-Files of electromagnetism. We're going to show you how a single mathematical choice made 100 years ago locked humanity in an energy crisis, and how a forgotten equation proves that your phone battery doesn't have to die. It's a dense story, but I promise, once you see the mechanism, you can't unsee it. Let's start with a simple experiment. I want you to visualize something with me. Close your eyes if you can. Unless you're driving.
Okay, I'm game. What are we picturing?
Imagine you've decided to build a windmill. And I'm not talking about some rustic wooden thing from a storybook.
Don Quixote stuff.
No, a state-of-the-art aerospace-grade engineering marvel. The blades are these perfect aerodynamic carbon fiber things. The bearings are frictionless. Magnetic levitation. It is an absolute masterpiece designed to catch every last bit of wind.
So the perfect renewable energy machine.
It is,
yeah,
in theory. But then, instead of putting this incredible machine on a windy hill or out in the ocean, you do something completely baffling.
Oh, here we go.
You build a massive airtight barn. You put the windmill inside, you bolt the doors, you seal the windows. There is zero air movement inside this barn.
Okay, that completely defeats the purpose. You've built a wind catcher and you've locked it away from the wind.
Oh, it gets so much worse. Because you still need the blades to spin, right? You've got quotas to meet, appearances to keep up. So inside this sealed, windless barn, you hook up a dirty, loud, inefficient diesel engine to the windmill's drive shaft. You burn gallons of fuel an hour just to force those perfect blades to turn. So you can stand outside and say, look at my brilliant power generation system.
That's absurd. It's a Rube Goldberg machine of just pure waste. It's almost comical.
And yet, if we are to believe the absolutely massive stack of research on the desk in front of us today, that is literally, and I mean literally, how every single electrical circuit in the modern world is designed.
And that is the core argument we are unpacking today. And it's a genuinely terrifying thought once it clicks. The central claim, and it's backed up by some very dense, very controversial physics, is that we are all swimming in a sea of infinite energy.
The active vacuum, as the physicists call it.
Exactly. But our technology, our engineering, our math is specifically designed to lock that barn door and pretend the wind doesn't exist.
We are burning fuel to spin a generator that, according to our main source today, the late Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden, could absolutely run itself if only we hadn't been taught what he calls suicidal engineering.
And let's be super clear for everyone listening. This isn't just another talk about green energy or solar panels or slightly better batteries.
No, this goes way deeper.
This is about a fundamental misunderstanding, or, as Bearden would argue, a deliberate suppression of how electromagnetism actually works. We're talking about the fabric of reality itself.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into the forbidden physics of the vacuum. And it is a story. It's a story that involves NASA cover-ups in the 1960s.
A literal heist at a magnetic motor lab where only the so-called impossible part was stolen.
And a Nobel Prize discovery that, for some reason, physics textbooks have just conveniently ignored for over 50 years.
It's a journey into what we're calling the ether's ghost. And honestly, it challenges pretty much everything we think we know about where electricity comes from. It implies that the energy crisis, well, it isn't a crisis of supply at all.
It's a crisis of design. Or maybe stupidity.
A crisis of stupidity.
Yeah. So let's unlock that barn door.
Let's do it.
Okay, to really get how we ended up in this self-imposed blackout, we have to start with a mystery. It feels like something straight out of a Cold War spy novel. We need to go back in time.
To the early 1960s, the space race is at its absolute peak. The U.S. and the Soviets are throwing everything they have at getting an edge. And NASA has this very specific, very practical problem.
Locomotion in space.
Right, locomotion in microgravity. It sounds simple, but just think about it for a second. If you're an astronaut trying to repair the outside of a capsule, you can't just walk.
No.
Yeah.
You push off a bolt, and Newton's third law sends you spinning off into the void.
You're just a balloon in a room with no floor. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and in space, that reaction can be fatal.
So they needed a way to anchor the astronauts. This is where Westinghouse comes in, the huge engineering company, a real titan of industry back then.
They put a brilliant engineer named Raymond Radus on the problem, and Radus invents something that sounds simple: magnetic shoes.
And I know what you're thinking. Okay, magnets on boots, big deal. Stick them to the steel hull.
But that's the trap. It's the obvious solution, and it absolutely does not work. Think about the physics of it. If you put a strong permanent magnet on the sole of your boot, and it has to be really strong to hold your body weight against any accidental push,
You'd be stuck.
you'd be completely stuck. You'd plant your foot on a steel beam and you would essentially be welded to the floor. You'd need a crowbar to pry your foot off to take the next step.
Not a good look for the heroic astronaut persona.
No. The other option is a massive battery pack powering an electromagnet you can switch on and off. But batteries are heavy. In the space program, every single ounce costs thousands of dollars to get into orbit, so that was out. Radus needed a permanent magnet, which requires zero power to stay on, that he could somehow turn off.
Which is supposed to be impossible. A permanent magnet is. Well, the clue is in the name. It's permanent.
That's what we're all taught. But Radus invented something that shouldn't exist, using what's now called the Radus effect. He created a magnetic circuit where the magnetic flow of energy could be rerouted.
Okay, so it's not turning it off, it's redirecting it.
Exactly. Imagine a magnet has two possible highways for its energy to flow down.
Like a train track switch.
Perfect analogy. Highway A goes out through the sole of the boot, clamping it to the metal floor. Highway B loops back inside the boot itself, completely bypassing the floor. Radus figured out how to use a tiny electrical coil to act as the switchman, flipping the magnetic traffic from Highway A to Highway B.
And the power usage is the part that it fries my brain.
That's the whole breakthrough. That's the secret sauce. To switch between stick and release required an almost immeasurably small amount of power. A tiny pulse. The magnet itself is a permanent dipole. It's always on. But Radus just found a way to gently nudge the flow.
And once you nudged it, it stayed there.
It remembered. It was bistable. It didn't need constant power to hold the state, only that microscopic tap to switch it.
We have descriptions from the source material of the test footage, and it sounds wild. You have an engineer in these boots hanging upside down from a steel I-beam in a Westinghouse lab. And he's not shuffling his feet. He's not sliding.
No, he's walking.
He is walking. He lifts his foot, takes a full stride, plants it, and lifts the other one. Comfortably. Upside down. Like some kind of industrial Spider-Man.
It was an incredibly elegant solution. It proved undeniably that you could control a massive magnetic force enough to hold a person against gravity with a microscopic input of energy. You weren't creating the force, you were just gating it. That distinction is everything.
So NASA must have loved this, right?
Yeah.
Problem solved. A huge win. I'm guessing they slap these on every spacesuit and we see astronauts walking on the ISS with them today?
You would think so. It was a perfect solution. But no, the project gets abruptly scrapped. The RADUS boots, they vanish from the official record. They're replaced by what NASA officially called shufflers.
Shufflers. That sounds like a serious downgrade. It sounds like something you'd wear around the house.
It was a monumental downgrade. These were just crude, always-on permanent magnets. The astronauts had to awkwardly scoot their feet along the surface without ever fully lifting them.
So they went from walking to shuffling.
Right. If they lifted a foot, they'd risk floating away. If they planted it flat, they'd get stuck. They went from a high-performance Ferrari back to a skateboard with square wheels. It makes no technical sense.
So why? Why on earth would you kill a technology that worked perfectly? Why make your astronauts' lives harder and more dangerous?
This is where Tom Bearden's analysis comes in, and it gets chilling. He argues that the RADUS boot was never just about footwear. It was a public proof of concept for a free energy gate.
Okay, let's unpack that leap. How do we get from a magnetic boot to free energy? That feels like a big jump.
Think about the mechanics. The boot uses a permanent magnet. Now, as Bearden points out, and we will get to the how of this later, a permanent magnet is constantly emitting energy that it draws from the vacuum.
Okay, so the magnet is a free, constant source of force.
And RADUS proved you can switch that massive force on and off, effectively for free. So, if you can switch a magnetic field for free, what can you build?
A motor.
You can build a motor. A motor is just magnets pushing and pulling at precisely the right time. Push, release, pull, release. That's what makes it spin.
The only reason we pay for electricity in a normal motor is because we have to energize coils to create those pushes and pulls. We pay to create the magnetic fields.
But if you use permanent magnets, the field is already there. It's free. The only cost should be the switching. And RADUS proved the switching could be free too.
So if NASA had kept using the boots, some clever engineer somewhere would have eventually looked at them and had a light bulb moment. Wait a minute, if I put these on a rotor?
I can make an engine that powers itself. And according to Bearden, that was the threat. It threatened the entire energy infrastructure, the energy cartels. If you officially admit that a permanent magnet is an open gate to a limitless source of energy, the whole house of cards starts to wobble.
The whole burn fuel to make power paradigm.
It collapses. So it wasn't about the boots, it was about the precedent. You couldn't let that genie out of the bottle.
And here's the kicker. In 2010, the boots were actually featured on PBS's History Detective show, and they found out that the boots never actually reached NASA's suit engineers. Instead, a former lab tech, Pat Bacardi, confirmed that Westinghouse folded the department up while the project was still in-house.
So they essentially buried the tech before it could ever leave the building. And when you look at the economics, it makes total sense. In the 1960s, Westinghouse was a centralized energy titan. They were securing massive, multi-hundred-million-dollar contracts for nuclear reactors and massive steam turbines. If every home could have a magnetic motor fueled by the vacuum, the multi-billion-dollar utility infrastructure Westinghouse provided would become obsolete.
Wow, that's heavy stuff.
In Bearden, he argues that a magnet isn't a battery that holds a charge and runs out. He says a magnet is an open system.
An open system. What's that mean?
Think of a windmill. If you see a windmill spinning, grinding grain, doing work, do you accuse it of creating energy? Do you say, hey, that windmill is violating thermodynamics?
No, of course not, because the wind is spinning it. It's harnessing a flow that's already there.
Exactly. Bearden argues that a magnet is a windmill, but instead of wind, it is gating energy from the vacuum of space itself. The energy is already flowing, the magnet just intercepts it. It's what's called a dipole.
So the argument is that the universe is just filled with this invisible energy river, and the magnet is just a device that dips a bucket into it.
Precisely. And if the RADUS boots worked, if you could switch that dip switch on and off without expending any power, then you could build a generator that runs forever.
Wow.
Or at least until the magnets degrade in a few hundred years.
And that scares people.
It scares the people who sell coal. It scares the people who sell oil. Bearden calls them the energy barons.
I see.
He suggests that the RADUS boots were buried because if that specific mechanism, magnetic memory, and flux switching became common knowledge, every engineer would be building a free energy generator within a year.
So the boots had to go. They buried the tech to protect the business model.
And it's not just a story. If you look at modern physics textbooks, try to find a chapter on magnetic memory or flux switching of permanent magnet.
I'm guessing I won't find one.
It's a ghost town.
Yeah.
It is a known phenomenon in specialized engineering circles, but it is effectively shuffled away from the mainstream curriculum.
That is wild.
Yeah.
It's like we had the keys to the kingdom, the keys to clean, endless energy in the 1960s, and we just threw them away because they didn't fit the profit margin.
Or because they didn't fit the accepted theory.
Right.
And people can verify for themselves. Just research keywords such as magnetic flux switching, the Wiegand effect, Kawhi path switching, etc.
And it really brings us to the elephant in the room, or maybe the ghost in the room. Why are we so deeply convinced that burning fuel is the only way? Why is it that if I say perpetual motion or free energy, most people, engineers included, immediately laugh?
Bearden's argument is that it's because we murdered the physics. We didn't just misunderstand it. We actively mutilated the math over 100 years ago.
We did. And to understand that crime scene, we have to talk about the victim. We have to talk about the ether.
The ether, yeah. This is that old school idea that the universe isn't empty, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
James Clerk Maxwell. The guy is basically the Shakespeare of physics. His equations for electromagnetism define our entire modern world. Your phone, Wi-Fi, the power grid, all of it runs on Maxwell's equations.
And he was a firm believer in the ether. For him and for pioneers like Michael Faraday, space wasn't empty. It was a plenum. It was a material fluid that filled everything. Light waves were ripples in this fluid. But then, the famous Michelson-Morley experiment in the 1880s. They tried to measure the Earth moving through this ether wind.
And they found nothing.
So case closed, right? No ether.
Well, they found no material wind. And that's the crucial distinction. They proved space wasn't filled with a stagnant physical substance like water or gas. But the physics community of the day, they panicked.
They threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Completely. They just concluded, okay, there's no ether. Space is just Nothing. A void. A vacuum in the truest sense of the word.
And Bearden says this was the single most catastrophic wrong turn in the history of science.
It was. Because modern quantum mechanics, ironically, actually agrees with Maxwell's premise, just not his mechanism. Quantum field theory tells us the vacuum is anything but empty.
It's seething, right?
It's seething. It's a virtual ether. It's a quantum foam boiling with virtual particles, popping in and out of existence on timescales too fast to measure directly. It's not a calm fluid. It's an incredibly high-pressure gas of pure potential energy. So Maxwell was right about the energy. He was just wrong about what was carrying the energy. He thought it was a material fluid, but it's actually a potential.
Precisely. The energy is there. But here's where the villain of our story enters the scene, at least in this narrative. A man named Oliver Heaviside.
Heaviside, the mathematician. I always picture him with a giant eraser, just simplifying everything.
That's a very good image for him. Maxwell wrote his original equations in a mathematical language called quaternions. Now, we don't need to get bogged down in the math, but quaternions are. They're rich, they're complex, they capture everything.
What do you mean by everything?
They have two parts. A vector component, which is the direction of flow, the stuff we can measure, and a scalar component, which you can think of as the internal pressure or the hidden potential of the system.
So if you're talking about a river, the vector is the direction the water is flowing, and the scalar is the pressure of the water.
That's a great analogy. It measured the flow and the pressure behind the flow. But Heaviside, who was a brilliant but very practical telegraph engineer, looked at these complex quaternion equations and said, this is way too hard. We don't need all this scalar pressure stuff to build better telegraph wires.
He dumbed it down. He created the CliffsNotes version of Maxwell's universe.
He did. He literally took a mathematical saw and cut off the scalar part. He just threw it away. He kept only the simple vector component that described the directional flow. And
in doing so, he cut the mathematical connection to that vacuum energy.
He severed it completely. And while Heaviside simplified the math, H.A. Lorentz went even further and introduced a mathematical trick, which forced two new free force fields to be equal and opposite, causing them to sum to a vector zero. This is what's known as the Lorentz regauging. It's a term Bearden uses constantly, and it's the key to the whole conspiracy, if you want to call it that.
Break that down for us. What does it actually mean to regauge the equations? It sounds so technical.
Okay, let's use another analogy. Imagine you have a garden hose, but it's not hooked up to your house. It's hooked up directly to the Pacific Ocean.
Okay, so infinite water, infinite pressure.
Right. The ocean is the vacuum energy. Now, you turn on the tap. The amount of energy that flows out is staggering. It's a tsunami. It would destroy your garden, your house, everything. It's too much to handle.
So we're flooding the daffodils. We're washing away the topsoil. I'm with you.
So Heaviside and Lorentz come along and they say, whoa, we can't calculate all this ocean. It's messy. It makes the equations impossible. So they mathematically cut the hose. They decide to just ignore the ocean entirely. They hold up a little teacup to catch a few drops of the spray, and they say,
let's just measure the teacup.
Let's just measure what's in the teacup. We will now define reality as only the water that fits in this cup. They just pretended the ocean wasn't there.
That feels like scientific malpractice.
It's worse. They balanced the equations to make the ocean mathematically equal zero. They said the energy flowing in from this weird scalar dimension equals the energy flowing out, so they cancel. Let's just focus on what happens in the wire. And in doing so, they discarded what Bearden calls the Heaviside component.
And what is that exactly?
It's this massive, non-diverged, non-physical energy flow that surrounds every single circuit. It's the wind that we've locked in the barn.
So you're telling me that when I turn on a lamp, the light I see is the teacup. But there's an invisible energy tsunami swirling all around the lamp that we've just been taught to ignore.
That's the Poynting flow. And here's the crazy part. Standard physics admits it's there. If you corner a physicist, they'll say, oh yeah, the Poynting vector exists. And for every watt of power used in the circuit, there are trillions of watts of this non-diverged Heaviside component flowing past.
Trillions.
Trillions. But they say it has no physical significance because it doesn't do any work. It doesn't heat up the resistor. And Bearden just screams at this idea. He says, of course it doesn't do work. You didn't build a sail to catch the wind. You built a thin wire.
This is what he calls electron psychosis. Our obsession with the electrons.
Imagine you are watching a whirlpool in the ocean. Mainstream scientists look at that swirl and say, look, there is a solid little ball moving through the water, and they call it an electron. Tesla believed that thinking of the electron as a solid, separate thing was a total delusion. In this view, the electron isn't a marble. It is just a vibration or a longitudinal sound wave moving through the etheric medium. The electron psychosis is the mistake of seeing a temporary ripple in the ether and being so convinced it's a solid object that you completely ignore the ocean of energy that is actually creating it. We have been taught that electricity is the electrons moving in the wire, like little marbles in a tube. Bearden says that's completely wrong. The energy flows outside the wire, through space, guided by the wire. The electrons are just the gears in the machine. They get ground down and heated up by this massive energy flow passing by.
So we've spent a century obsessing over the squeaking gears and completely ignoring the engine that's making them turn.
We're looking at the spinning blades of the windmill and ignoring the wind. It's the barn analogy all over again. And because Heaviside took the wind out of the math, we've spent 100 years building circuits that only use the gears and are specifically designed not to tap into the wind.
Okay, let's take a breath here for a second.
A good idea. My brain is buzzing a little bit.
So just to recap for everyone listening, because this is a lot. We started with magnetic boots for astronauts.
Boots that proved you could switch a huge magnetic force for basically zero energy. A perfect energy gate.
And that technology was mysteriously scrapped. Then we found out that the very mathematical foundation of our electrical world was, well, it was deliberately crippled over a century ago.
Right. They threw out the connection to this ocean of energy, the active vacuum, just to make the equations simpler for telegraph engineers. And that's the world we've inherited.
So the next logical question has to be, if this energy is real and it's all around us, hiding in plain sight, how in the world do we actually grab it? If we can't use normal wires because they just ignore it, what do we use?
Well, now we have to go looking for the ghosts in the machine. Now we have to talk about scalar waves.
Scalar waves. Okay, this is the term that gets thrown around a lot in, sci-fi. Scalar weapons, scalar healing. It often sounds like pure technobabble. But in the context of Bearden's work, what is a scalar wave? He describes it using the idea of the zero vector.
Host, imagine you and I are standing, facing each other. I put my hands on your shoulders and I push with, say, 100 pounds of force.
Okay, I'm bracing myself. I can take it. For a little while.
Now, at the same time, you put your hands on my shoulders and you push back with exactly 100 pounds of force. We are locked. We are pushing against each other with everything we've got. To someone standing 10 feet away, watching us, are we moving?
No, we're perfectly still. It looks like a stalemate. A perfect zero.
Exactly. The net movement, the vector, is zero. Standard Heaviside style physics looks at that and says, zero movement equals zero energy. Nothing is happening here.
But I'm sweating. My muscles are screaming. I'm under immense stress and pressure. There's absolutely something happening.
That is the scalar potential. The zero vector isn't nothingness. It is immense, locked, compressed pressure. It's stress on the very fabric of space-time itself. Standard physics looks for the movement. Scalar physics looks at the stress.
Bearden says this stress can propagate. It can move as a wave.
It can. If we pulse that pressure push, release, without ever actually moving from our spots, we're creating a longitudinal wave. It's a compression wave, like sound moving through air. But this is a compression wave moving through the potential of the vacuum.
This is where the Soviet research that Bearden was so obsessed with comes in. He talks about a scientist he calls Siberian Kolya.
Yes, Gennady Nikolaev.
Yeah.
A crucial and almost totally unknown figure in this underground history. He was a Russian physicist who experimentally discovered what he called the second magnetic field.
The second magnetic field. I thought there was just magnetism.
Standard magnetism, the kind that moves a compass needle, is transverse. The force pushes at a right angle to the direction of flow. It wiggles side to side. Nikolaev found a field that was longitudinal. It didn't wiggle. It pushed straight forward. It compressed.
Nikolaev proved, experimentally, that there is a second magnetic field, a scalar or longitudinal magnetic field.
So we've just been ignoring the sound waves of electromagnetism this whole time.
That's precisely his argument. And because we ignore them, we don't build machines that can detect them or use them. We build our entire technological world to catch the ocean waves, and we're totally deaf to the sound waves.
So how did he prove it? You can't just say there's a secret field.
He performed an experiment. It's known as the Siberian Kolya experiment. And the experiment is so elegant and simple, which is what makes it so powerful. Imagine you have a toroidal magnet. That's a donut-shaped magnet.
Okay, got the donut in my head.
Now, you cut that donut in half. You take one of the halves, you flip it upside down. And then you glue it back together.
So the poles are all messed up. You have north touching north on one side and south touching south on the other.
Essentially, yes. Now, according to conventional physics, what should happen? The magnetic fields from each half should completely cancel each other out. The vector sum should be 0.
So if you put a compass next to it, nothing should happen. It should be magnetically dead to the outside world.
And that's what happened. The compass didn't move. The transverse field, the one we all know, was indeed 0. But, and this is the whole point, Nikola have showed that a scalar stress field remained.
A ghost field.
A ghost field.
Yeah.
The donut was still exerting a force, but it was a longitudinal force. It was exerting pressure on the vacuum itself.
Pressure on the vacuum? What does that even mean in practical terms? It sounds so...
It means that empty space isn't empty. It has properties. It can be stressed. Even though the force that you could measure with a standard meter was 0, the energy was still there, trapped and pressing against the very fabric of space.
And this connects back to the Radus boots. They were tapping into this scalar field.
The way they manipulated the flux paths implies a level of control over this interaction with the vacuum. If you can control the scalar field, this stress in spacetime, you can potentially tap into the energy of the vacuum. You're accessing the active medium that these physicists describe. Bearden calls this the ghost field.
He does, because it has ghost-like properties. It passes right through standard electromagnetic shielding.
Right.
A Faraday cage, which stops normal radio waves dead.
Right, like putting your phone in a microwave oven. Don't turn it on, and it loses the signal.
Exactly. A scalar wave, this longitudinal compression wave, goes right through the microwave shielding. It goes right through the Earth. According to Bearden, it doesn't interact with the electron shells of atoms. It interacts directly with the atomic nuclei.
It ignores the fence and talks directly to the homeowner.
Perfect way to put it. It's a fundamentally different kind of physics.
Which sounds, well, it sounds potentially dangerous.
But as you'd imagine, playing with the fundamental pressure of the universe is not without its risks.
The sources are pretty clear that this line of research has a body count.
It does. When you start poking at the foundations of a multi-trillion-dollar energy monopoly or the military-industrial complex that weaponizes the secrecy, there are consequences.
We need to talk about Stefan Marinov.
Marinov, a key figure. He was a Bulgarian physicist, a colleague of Nikolaev's, and he was trying to bring this research to the West. He was very vocal. He was building generators based on these principles.
And the outline mentions his tragic death.
Yes. In Graz, Austria, he fell, or was pushed, from a university library building. It was ruled a suicide, the classic despondent scientist narrative.
Case close.
But the sources highlight one incredibly bizarre detail, something that doesn't fit the story of a simple fall.
The luminescent pavement.
Correct. Reports from the scene described a strange, glowing signature on the pavement where his body landed, as if the asphalt itself was glowing with its own light.
What, like it was radioactive?
Or scalar. The implication in the source material is that this was the signature of a longitudinal EM wave weapon, a scalar weapon. Bearden refers to a high cabal, a global control group that has this technology, and uses it to suppress anyone who gets too close. The suggestion is Marinov was eliminated, and the weapon they used left a trace, a disruption in the local space-time that caused inert matter to emit light.
That is absolutely chilling. So this isn't just about hiding a better motor. This is about having weapons that can kill at a distance and leave. Ghosts in the pavement.
It brings the entire threat into focus. If you can manipulate the scalar field, you can power a city for free, sure, but you can also disassemble a person from a satellite in orbit.
The suppression is about both greed and fear.
Greed to protect the energy monopoly and abject fear of this technology proliferating.
The sources talk a lot about the weaponization of these waves.
We have to touch on that. The Soviet research, according to Bearden, wasn't just about clean energy. If you can create and direct a point of stress in the fabric of space-time at a distance, you can do some really terrifying things.
Like what?
You can trigger earthquakes by stressing tectonic plates. You can disrupt weather patterns by creating high or low pressure zones in the atmosphere. You can create cold explosions where materials just shatter from internal stress without any heat. Bearden was convinced the Soviets had developed scalar howitzers that could do all of this.
But we're trying to stay on the light side of the force today. We're here for the windmill, not the Death Star.
Right, and the upside is, it's just as massive as the downside is terrifying. If you can learn to tap into this universal stress, you're tapping into the pressure of the vacuum itself. You're not burning fuel to wiggle a few electrons. You're literally uncorking the pressure of the universe.
How do you uncork it? You need a machine. You need a device that can trick the vacuum into doing work for you. And this brings us to one of my absolute favorite characters in this whole saga, Howard Johnson.
The Magnet Man. And no, for everyone listening, we are not talking about the hotel guy. There are no 28 flavors of ice cream involved here.
Howard Johnson was this brilliant, stubborn inventor who he didn't care what the textbook said was impossible. He was playing with magnets in his workshop, and he stumbled onto something that mainstream science is only now starting to understand.
Bearden points out that Johnson was doing spintronics decades before the term even existed.
And for the viewer, spintronics, short for spin electronics, is an advanced field of physics that moves beyond traditional electronics by focusing on the electron's spin rather than just its electrical charge. When manipulating the direction of the spin, you can amplify a magnet's strength or create devices that are much faster and produce far less heat than current technology.
He realized that a permanent magnet isn't just a solid, uniform block of magnetism. It's a chaotic, swirling dance of countless individual electron spins.
And he found a way to harness something called the exchange force. What in the world is that? It sounds like something from Wall Street.
It does, doesn't it? But it's pure quantum mechanics. The exchange force is this incredibly powerful but very short-range kick that happens between particles with aligned spins. It's something like 1,000 times stronger than the normal magnetic force we're familiar with.
1,000 times.
But it only lasts for a microsecond and works over a tiny distance. It's like a microscopic karate chop. Immensely powerful, but you have to be right on top of your target.
So normal motors use the weak long-range magnetic force. Johnson figured out how to use the super powerful short-range quantum kick.
Yes, he designed a very specific, very precise geometry of magnets, what he called a magnetic gate, that would force the rotor magnet to pass by the stator magnets at just the right distance and angle to trigger this exchange force.
And here, stator is just shorthand for the stationary magnetic components of an engine. So he was surfing the quantum kicks.
That is a fantastic way to put it. He was designing the racetrack so that the race car would hit these quantum turbo boost pads at exactly the right moments.
And the purpose of these kicks was to overcome the big problem with all magnet motors, right? The back EMF or the sticky spot.
That's the dragon every magnet motor inventor has to slay. You get a nice push from the magnets repelling, but then as the rotor spins around, you hit a spot where the magnets want to attract and pull you backwards, stopping the rotation. That drag is back EMF. Johnson used the powerful exchange force kick to blast the rotor through that sticky spot.
So he gets the free push, and then just as he's about to get hit with the drag, bam, he gets a quantum kick in the pants that keeps him going.
And the result was a motor that ran on nothing but permanent magnets. No battery, no input power. The magnets were the engine, but they never ran out of power because they weren't being used up. They were just acting as gates, channeling that energy from the vacuum.
Bearden claims that Johnson built a working prototype that produced 200 times more power than a standard magnetic interaction of that size should allow. 200 times. That is not a measurement error. That's a different reality.
And here is where the story goes from a science documentary to a thriller movie. Johnson has this prototype. It's working. It self-rotates for hours on end in his lab. He has proven the concept. He is on the verge of changing the world and the heist.
His lab gets broken into. Now, normally, if thieves had a high-tech lab, they're stealing the expensive oscilloscopes, the copper wiring, the power tools, stuff they can sell quick.
Not this time. Johnson's lab was full of valuable equipment. The thieves left all of it. They went straight for the prototype motor. And here's the really weird part. They didn't even take the whole motor. They took only the specific custom-shaped magnet assemblies that made up the magnetic gate, the stator.
That's incredibly specific. That's like breaking into a bank and ignoring the stacks of cash to steal the combination to the main vault.
It implies a deep level of technical knowledge. The thieves knew exactly which part was the impossible part. They didn't want the motor's frame or the rotor. They wanted the secret sauce. The precise geometry of the magnets.
And Bearden argues this is the ultimate validation of the technology. If there was just some crackpot in his garage with a toy, nobody sends a professional team to steal just the magnets.
It suggests that someone, somewhere, knew he had cracked the code and wanted that code for themselves. It suggests this suppressed physics isn't just a theory, it's a reality that powerful groups are watching very, very closely.
Okay, if your mind is currently blown by the idea that your refrigerator magnets are actually tiny quantum energy gates that people are staging heists to steal, you really need to hit that subscribe button.
And maybe double-check the locks on your own workshop while you're at it. You never know. Seriously, though, join the membership. We get to dive into these forbidden files every single week, and your support helps us keep the lights on. At least until we can get our hands on a Howard Johnson motor to power the studio.
We're still working on that part, but the research continues.
All right, so we've had the boots, the mutilated math, the scalar waves, and the stolen motor. But we have to get to the absolute core of the argument, the why. Why does any of this work? Why does a magnet work at all? Bearden drops an absolute bomb in his book, Energy from the Vacuum. He says every single atom in the universe is an infinite battery.
This is the source charge paradox, and for me, this is the most profoundly mind-bending part of this entire deep dive. This is the piece of the puzzle that really keeps me up at night.
Okay, let's just look at a single electron. It spins, it has an electric charge, it constantly radiates an electromagnetic field around itself. It has been doing this without stopping since the beginning of time.
Right. It's a very busy little particle, never takes a break. So here's the question. Where is it getting the energy to do that? If I spin a toy top on my desk, friction makes it stop. If I turn on a flashlight, the battery eventually dies. But an electron spins and radiates energy forever.
Standard physics just says, well, that's just an intrinsic property of the electron.
That feels like a total cop-out. That's not an explanation. That's just giving a name to a mystery.
Bearden calls it what it is. He says, that's magic. That is a complete violation of the conservation of energy. If a particle is continuously radiating real energy, it must be continuously receiving energy from somewhere. Otherwise, it's a true perpetual motion machine.
So, is the electron a perpetual motion machine?
In a way, yes, but not because it creates energy out of nothing. Bearden says the electron in every charged particle is an open system. It's not a closed box. It is constantly drinking from the vacuum.
It's eating vacuum energy. This connects back to that Nobel Prize we mentioned earlier, doesn't it? 1957, Li and Yang.
Broken symmetry. This is the absolute key to everything. Li and Yang won the Nobel Prize for proving that in certain particle interactions, symmetry is broken. And when symmetry is broken, the classical law of conservation of energy no longer has to hold true.
And Bearden applies this idea to a dipole, which is a separation of charges, right? Positive on one side, negative on the other, like a battery terminal.
Exactly. Or a permanent magnet with its north and south pole. That is a dipole. When you create a dipole, when you pull those opposite charges apart, you break the symmetry of the vacuum. And the vacuum, the seething high-pressure plenum, absolutely hates broken symmetry. So it rushes in to try and fix it.
It's like digging a hole in the wet sand at the beach. As soon as you scoop the sand out, the water rushes in to fill the hole.
That is the perfect analogy. The dipole is the hole in the sand. The vacuum energy is the water rushing in. The dipole absorbs that flood of virtual energy from the vacuum, transforms it into real, measurable electromagnetic energy, and spits it out into our world.
So the chemical energy in a battery, it isn't the stuff that lights the bulb.
No. The battery isn't a box full of electricity. The battery is a gate. The chemical reactions inside the battery are just doing the work of keeping the positive and negative terminals separate, of keeping the hole open.
The battery just pays the energy cost to keep the door open. The actual energy that flows out and powers my phone comes from the vacuum.
That's the argument. And it completely flips our understanding of energy on its head.
If that's true, if the energy is coming from the vacuum and the battery is just the gatekeeper, then why do batteries die? Why do I have to charge my phone every single night?
Because of the suicidal circuit. This is Bearden's most famous and most damning critique of modern electrical engineering.
I love that term, suicidal circuit. It's so beautifully dramatic.
But it's technically accurate from his point of view. Think about how we build every single circuit. We run a wire from the positive terminal of the battery through the light bulb where it does work, and then where do we send it?
Back to the negative terminal. You complete the loop. That's literally the first thing you learn in Electricity 101. You need a closed loop for current to flow.
And Bearden says that closed loop is what kills us. When we force those spent electrons back to the battery, they smash into the dipole, they recombine with the positive charges, they fill in the hole in the sand, they slam the gate shut.
Wait, so you're telling me we are using the very energy we just collected from the vacuum to destroy the gate that was giving us the energy in the first place?
Bearden's calculation is that we use fully half of the energy we collect just to destroy the source dipole. We are like a man in a sinking boat who is bailing water out and then pouring it right back into his own boat.
That's not just inefficient. That is certifiably insane.
It's the closed-loop design. It's a system designed to enforce equilibrium. It guarantees that you can never, ever get more energy out than you put in because you are actively using the output to kill the input. And again, this all goes back to the idea of forcing the equilibrium, destroying the dipole, not because of a law of nature, but because of a man-made mathematical choice. When Lorentz symmetrically re-gauged the Maxwell Heaviside equations.
So what's the alternative? How do you stop the circuit from committing suicide?
You build an open path. You let the energy flow from the source out to the load, where it does its work, but you don't send the current back to kill the source dipole. You ground it out, or you shuttle it to a separate collector. You break the loop.
This is what Radus was doing with the boots. He wasn't fighting the Magnus force. He was just diverting its flow. This is what Howard Johnson was doing with his motor, using the quantum kick to dodge the back EMF.
Exactly. They were, perhaps intuitively, engineering systems that didn't commit suicide. They allowed the vacuum to continuously feed the dipole. They kept the hole in the sand open and let the ocean of energy just keep pouring in.
Okay. If this is all true, if the Nobel Prize-winning physics has been sitting there since 1957, if the inventions have been built and demonstrated and even stolen, why aren't we using this? Why are we still burning coal and building windmills inside of barns?
Well, Bearden would give you a two-part answer. Part one is dogmatic inertia and academic stupidity. Part two is active, ruthless suppression. But if we step back from the conspiracy angle for a moment, it's also about a massive psychological shift.
It's a shift from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of abundance.
That's it exactly. Old physics, the physics of the closed loop, of thermodynamics, is the physics of death. It says energy is conserved and finite. You must burn something to get something. Everything eventually runs down and dies. It is a fundamental mindset of scarcity.
And this new physics, the physics of the active vacuum.
It's the physics of life. It says the universe is active, it's generative, it's seething with infinite potential.
There's a mention of Heaviside dark energy.
Bearden argues that this massive untapped energy flow that we threw out of the equations, that is the missing dark matter and dark energy that astronomers have been searching for decades.
It's not some exotic new particle, it's the energy we've been ignoring.
It's been right there in the math the whole time. It explains gravity, it explains why galaxies don't fly apart. We just need to put it back into the equations. We don't need to burn the world down to get power. We just need to be clever enough to build the right windmills and put them in the wind. We need to become creators, not just consumers.
Bearden has this great phrase, the genie of understanding. He says that once humanity truly understands that the vacuum is active, we stop being cavemen investigating fire.
It's what he called the graduation. He saw this as the threshold of total human transformation. If we master this, it's not just about free electricity for your TV and toaster. If you can engineer the vacuum energy, that scalar stress, you can do almost anything.
You can manipulate gravity.
Bearden was convinced of it. He believed gravity is just a particular longitudinal wave pattern in the vacuum. If you can engineer the wave, you can engineer gravity, you could have reactionless propulsion, space travel would become as easy as taking a bus.
You could potentially heal the body.
He believed so, that our cells communicate using these scalar biopotentials. If you can correct the distorted signals, the time-reversed waves in a diseased cell, you could theoretically reverse the disease itself. We're not just fixing the machine, we're reprogramming the original blueprint.
And of course, the big one. You end resource wars. There is no reason to fight over oil if every single point in space is a limitless gas station.
It's the transition to a true Type 1 civilization. It's moving from burning the dead fossils of our planet to using the living machinery of the universe itself.
But first, we have to stop building suicidal circuits.
We have to stop locking the windmill in the barn. We have to be brave enough to tear the barn down.
This has been an absolutely wild ride. We've gone from astronauts walking upside down to quantum kicks inside magnets to the absolutely staggering realization that our entire technological civilization is based on a design that deliberately destroys its own energy source.
It is a lot to take in. It challenges everything. But the core message, I think, is an incredibly hopeful one. The energy isn't missing. We're not running out. It's right here, all around us. It's even in the static on your radio.
That's a fantastic final thought. Explain that. What do you mean the static?
Bearden used to say that. The next time you turn on an old AM radio and you hear that hiss between stations, that white noise, don't think of it as just random interference. That is the sound of the infinite vacuum energy trying to get in. It's the roar of the ocean pounding on the door. Our circuits are specifically designed to filter that out and call it noise. But that noise is the signal. That noise is the power. We just need to learn how to stop filtering it out and start tuning it in.
We just need to finally unlock the barn door. Listeners, thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Don't let your circuits stay suicidal.
And always question the closed loop.
Stay curious. We'll see you in the next one.